Her secret diary. Hermione remained in the hospital for several weeks. There was a flurry of rumors about her disappearance. Then the rest of the school arrived back from the Christmas holidays. Because, of course, everyone thought she had been attacked, so many students fled past the hospital wing, trying to get a glimpse of her. But Madame Pomfrey took to her curtains again and placed them around Hermione's bed to spare her from the shame of being seen with a fur face. Harry and Ron went to visit her every evening. When the term started, they brought each day's homework. Well, I'd add whiskers. I'd take a break from work, said Ron, tipping the back of his books onto Hermione's bedside table one evening. Don't be silly, Ron. I've got to keep up, said Hermione briskly. Her spirits were greatly improved by the fact that all the hair was gone from her face, and her eyes were starting to turn slowly back to brown. "You don't suppose you've got any new leads?" she asked in a whisper, so that Madame Pomfrey couldn't hear her. "Nothing," said Harry gloomily. "I was so sure it was Malfoy," said Ron for the 100th time. "What's that?" asked Harry, pointing to something gold sticking out from under Hermione's pillow. "Oh, it's just a get well card," said Hermione hastily, trying to poke it out of sight, but Ron, too quick for her, pulled it out and flicked it open and read aloud. "To Miss Granger, wishing you speedy recovery from your concerned teacher, Professor Gilderoy Lockhart, Order of Merlin, 3rd class, honorary member of the Dark Arts Force against the Defense League, and 4-time winner of the Witches Weekly Most Charming Smile Award." Oof. Ron looked at Hermione, disgust. "You sleep with it under your pillow?" But Hermione spared answering any more by Madame Pomfrey, sweeping over with her evening dose of medicine. "Is Lockhart the swarmiest bloke you've ever met? Or what?" Ron said to Harry as they left the infirmary and started up the stairs towards Gryffindor Tower. Snape had given them so much homework. Harry thought it was likely he'd be in the 6th year before he finished it. Ron was just saying he wished he had asked Hermione how many rat tails were supposed to be added to the hair-raising potion, and the angry about outbursts of the floor above reached their ears. "That's Filch," Harry muttered, as they hurried up the stairs and paused out of sight, listening hard. "You don't think someone else has been attacked?" said Ron intensely. They stood still with their heads inclined towards Filch's voice, which sounded quite hysterical. "Even more work for me mopping up all night. Like I haven't got enough to do. Do this in the final straw. I'm going to Dumbledore." His footsteps receded and they got out of sight of the corridor. They heard a distant door slam. They poked their heads around the corner. Filch had clearly been maintaining his usual lookout post. They were once again the spot where Mrs. Norris had been attacked. They saw at a glance what Filch had been shouting about. A great flood of water stretched over half of the corridor. It looked as though it was still seeping from under the door of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Now that Filch had stopped shouting, they could hear Myrtle wails echoing down the bathroom walls. "Now, what's up with her?" said Ron. "Let's go see," said Harry. And holding their robes over their ankles and stepped through the great wash of water to the door, bearing its out of order sign, ignored as always, and entered. Moaning Myrtle was crying. It is possible louder and harder than ever before. She seemed to be hiding down in her usual toilet. It was dark in the bathroom because the candles were extinguished in the great rush of water that had left both the walls and floor soaking wet. "What's up, Myrtle?" said Harry. "Who's that?" gluged Myrtle miserably. "Come to throw something else at me?" Harry waded across the stall and said, "Why would I throw something at you?" "Don't ask me," Myrtle shouted. emerging with a wave of yet another more water and splashed onto the already sopping floor. Here I am, minding my own business, and someone thinks it's funny to throw a book at me. But it can't hurt you if someone throws something at you, said Harry reasonably. I mean, it'd just go right through you, wouldn't it? He had said the wrong thing. Myrtle puffed herself up and shrieked, Let's just throw all the books at Myrtle, because she can't feel it. 10 points if you can't get it through her stomach. 50 points if it goes through her head. Well, ha ha ha! What a lovely game, I don't think. Who threw it at you anyway? Asked Harry. I don't know. I was just sitting in this U-bend, thinking about death, and it was right through the top of my head, said Myrtle, glaring at them. It's over there. It got washed out. Harry and Ron looked under the sink, where Myrtle was just pointing. A small, thin book lay there. It had a shabby black cover, and was yet wet and everything else in the bathroom. Harry stepped in toward and picked it up, but Ron suddenly flung out an arm to hold him back. What? Are you crazy? Said Ron. It could be dangerous. Dangerous? Said Harry, laughing. Come off it. How could it be dangerous? You'd be surprised, said Ron, looking apprehensively at the book. Some of the books the ministry have confiscated, Dad told me. There was one that burned your eyes out, and everyone who read the sonnets of sorcerers spoke in limericks for the rest of their lives. Some old witch in Bath had a book that you could never stop reading. You just had to wander around with the nose in it, trying to do everything else one-handed. And all right, I've got the point, said Harry. The little book lay on the floor, nondescript and soggy. Well, we won't find out what it is unless we look at it, he said. And he ducked around Ron and picked it up off the floor. Harry saw at once it was a diary, and the faded year on the cover told him it was 50 years old. He opened it eagerly. On the first page he could make out the first name, T.M. Riddle, in smudged ink. Hang on, said Ron, who approached it cautiously. He was looking over Harry's shoulder. I know that name, T.M. Riddle. He got an award for special services at the school 50 years ago. How on earth did you know that? Harry said in amazement. Because Filch made me polish the shield about 50 times. In detention, said Ron resentfully. That was the one I bubbed slugs all over. If you wiped the slime off the name for an hour, you'd remember it too. Harry peeled the wet pages apart. They were completely blank, and there was some faintest trace of writing on any of them. Not even Auntie Mabel's birthday, or dentist, or 3:30. He never wrote in it, said Harry, disappointed. Wonder why someone wanted to flush it away, said Ron, curiously. Harry turned back the back cover and looked and saw a printed name of a variety store of Vauxhall Road, London. He mustn't be Muggle-born, said Harry, thoughtfully, to have bought a diary from Vauxhall Road. Well, it's not much use to you, said Ron. He dropped his voice. 50 points if you can get it through Myrtle's nose. Harry, however, pocketed it. Hermione left the hospital in the wing, de-whiskered, tailless, and fur-free. At the beginning of February, on her first evening back to the Gryffindor Tower, Harry showed her T.M. Riddle's diary and told her the story of how they had found it. Ooh, it must have been have hidden powers, said Hermione enthusiastically, taking the diary to look at it closely. If it's hiding it's hiding them very well, said Ron. Maybe, shyly, I don't know why you don't just chuck it, Harry. I wish I knew why someone did try to chuck it, said Harry. I wouldn't mind knowing how Riddle got an award for special services at Hogwarts, either. Could have been anything, said Ron. Maybe he got 30 owls, or saved a teacher from a giant squid, or maybe murdered Myrtle. That would have done everyone a favor. But Harry could tell from the arrested look on Hermione's face that she was thinking, and what she was thinking. What? Said Harry, looking at one another. Well, the Chamber of Secrets was opened 50 years ago, wasn't it? He said. That's what Malfoy said. Yeah, said Ron slowly. And this diary is 50 years old, said Hermione, tapping it excitedly. So? Oh, Ron, wake up, snapped Hermione. We know this person who opened the Chamber of Secrets was expelled 50 years ago. We know T.M. Riddle got an award for special services to the school 50 years ago. Well, what if Riddle got his special award for catching the heir of Slytherin? His diary would probably tell us everything. Where the chamber is, how it opens, what sort of creature lives in there. The person who's behind the attacks this time would want that lying around, would they? That's a brilliant theory, Hermione, said Ron. With just one little flaw. There's nothing written in the diary. But Hermione was pulling her wand out of her bag. It might be invisible ink, she whispered. She tapped the diary 3 times. Aproceum. Nothing happened. Undaunted, Hermione shoved her hand back into her bag and pulled out what appeared to be a bright red eraser. It's a revealer. I got it at Diagon Alley, she said. She rubbed hard on January 1st. Nothing happened. I'm telling you, there's nothing in there, said Ron. Riddle just got a diary for Christmas. You couldn't be bothered filling it in. Harry couldn't explain, even to himself, why he didn't just throw Riddle's diary away. In fact, that was even though he knew the diary was blank. He kept absent-mindedly picking it up and turning the pages through it. His very story he wanted to finish. And while Harry was sure he never heard of the name T.M. Riddle before, it seemed to mean something to him, almost as though Riddle was a friend he had when he was very small, that he had half forgotten. But this was absurd. He never had any friends before Hogwarts. Dudley made sure of that. Nevertheless, Harry was determined to find out more about Riddle. So the next day, he headed to the trophy room and examined Riddle's special award, accompanied by interested Hermione and thoroughly unconvinced Ron, who told them he'd seen nearly enough trophies to last him for a lifetime. Riddle's banished gold shield was tucked away in the corner cabinet. It didn't carry details of why it had been given to him. Good thing, too, or it'd have been even bigger, and I'll be than when I was polishing it, said Ron. I'd still be polishing it. However, they did find Riddle's name on an old medal for magical merit, and on the list of the old head boys. Oh, he sounds like Percy, said Ron, wrinkling up his nose in disgust. Prefect, head boy. Probably top of his class. You say it like that's a bad thing, Hermione in a slightly hurt voice. The sun now began to shine weakly on Hogwarts again. Inside the castle, the mood had grown more hopeful. There had been no more attacks since those on Justin and nearly headless Nick, and Madame Pomfrey was pleased to report the mandrakes were becoming moody and secretive, meaning that they're first leaving their childhood. The moment their acne clears up, they'll be ready for reporting again, Harry heard her tell Filch kindly one afternoon. And after that, it won't be long before we're cutting them up and stewing them. You'll have Mrs. Norris back in no time. Perhaps the heir of Slytherin had lost his nerve, thought Harry. It must be getting riskier and riskier to open the Chamber of Secrets when the whole school is so alert and suspicious. Perhaps the monster, whatever it was even now settling itself down to hibernate for another 50 years. Ernie McCullum of Hufflepuff didn't take this cheerful view. He was still convinced Harry was the guilty one, and that he had given himself away at the dueling club. Peeves wasn't helping matters at all. He kept popping up in the crowded corridors. "Oh, Potter, you rotter!" Now with a dance routine to match it. Gilderoy Lockhart seemed to think he himself had made the attack stop. Harry overheard him telling Professor McGonagall so while the Gryffindors were lining up for transfiguration. "I don't think there'll be any more trouble, Minerva," he said, tapping his nose knowingly and winking. "I think the chamber has been locked for good this time. The culprit must have known it was only a matter of time before I caught him. Rather sensible not to stop now before I came down hard on him. You know what the school needs now is a morale booster. Wash away the memories of that term. I won't say any more just now. I think I know the right thing." He tapped his nose again and strode off. Lockhart's idea of a morale booster was a clear at breakfast time on February 14th. Harry had much sleep because of the late running Quidditch practice the night before, and so he hurried down to the great hall, slightly late. He thought for a moment he had walked through the wrong doors. The walls were all covered with large, lurid pink flowers. Worse yet, still, the heart-shaped confetti was falling from the pale blue ceiling. Harry went over to Gryffindor table, and Ron was sitting there, looking sickened, and Hermione seemed to be having overcome with the giggles. "What's going on?" Harry asked them, sitting down and wiping the confetti off his bacon. Ron pointed to the teacher's table, apparently too disgusted to speak. Lockhart was wearing lurid pink robes to match his decorations. He was waving for silence. The teachers on either side of them were looking stony-faced. From where he sat, Harry could see the muscles going in Professor McGonagall's cheek. Snape looked as though someone had just fed him a large beaker of Skelgro. "Happy Valentine's Day!" Lockhart shouted. "And may I thank 46 people who have so far sent me cards. Yes, I have taken the liberty of arranging a little surprise for you all. And it doesn't end here." Lockhart clapped his hands, and through the doors entered a hall march, a dozen sturdy-looking dwarfs. Not just any dwarfs, however. Lockhart had them all wearing golden wings and carrying harps. "My friendly card-giving carrying cupids," beamed Lockhart. "They will be moving around the school today delivering your valentines. And the fun doesn't stop there. I'm sure my colleagues will want to enter into the spirit of the occasion. Why not ask Professor Snape to show you how to whip up a love potion? And while you're at it, Professor Flitwick knows more about entrancing enhancements of any wizard I've ever met. Sly old dog." Professor Flitwick buried his hands. Snape was looking as though the first person to ask him for a love potion would be forced fed poison.